across the country. We celebrate the love, support, and skills provided by the charity's staff, volunteers, and supporters. When many people slink away at the sight of a friend's bereavement, CBUK's staff embrace strangers.
You won't believe what just happened at Buckingham Palace. Tom Parker Bowles stunned everyone by demanding Princess Diana's most precious jewels, and Prince William's reaction will shock you. William is absolutely livid, and sources say this could destroy the royal family forever. Palace insiders are calling it the biggest royal scandal in decades. What happens next will leave you speechless.
With history and with each other through our mutual love of books. Now, there are a few houses and gardens in England that are quite as steeped in literature as this one.
The morning of October 15th started like any other at Buckingham Palace, with staff members going about their usual routines and the familiar sounds of London traffic filtering through the grand windows. But by noon, everything had changed. It all started with a phone call that Tom Parker Bowles made to his stepfather's private secretary just after 11 in the morning. The food writer and critic, known for his measured approach to royal matters and his consistent public statements about not considering himself part of the royal family, had apparently decided to break with his usual reserved demeanor. According to palace sources who spoke on condition of anonymity, Tom had requested an urgent meeting with King Charles to discuss what he termed a matter of family inheritance that has been overlooked for far too long. The request itself was unusual. Tom Parker Bowles, despite being the stepson of the monarch and son of Queen Camilla, had always maintained a careful distance from royal affairs. His previous interactions with the palace had been limited to major ceremonial occasions and family gatherings. He had consistently emphasized in interviews that he worked for a living, that his children attended regular schools, and that he did not expect or want any special treatment because of his mother's marriage to the king. But something had clearly shifted in his perspective. When Tom arrived at the palace that afternoon, he was carrying a leather briefcase and wore the serious expression of someone who had come to conduct important business. Palace staff noted that he seemed more formal than usual, dressed in a dark suit rather than his typical casual attire. He was escorted directly to one of the smaller private meeting rooms, rather than the more formal reception areas typically used for official business. The meeting began cordially enough. Tom expressed his gratitude for everything the royal family had done for his mother, and acknowledged the warmth with which they had welcomed him and his children into their extended family circle. He spoke fondly of King Charles, whom he had known since childhood and who had served as his godfather long before becoming his stepfather. He mentioned how his children, Lola and Freddie, had always enjoyed their interactions with their step-grandfather and appreciated being included in certain family events. But then the conversation took an unexpected turn. Tom opened his briefcase and removed several documents that he had apparently prepared in advance. According to sources familiar with the meeting, these included photographs of various pieces of jewelry, historical records about royal inheritance practices, and what appeared to be a carefully researched legal brief about the rights of step-grandchildren in the royal family. Tom's central argument was both simple and shocking in its audacity. He believed that his children, as the step-grandchildren of the king and the grandchildren of the queen, deserved to inherit some portion of the jewelry collection that had belonged to Princess Diana. He pointed out that while Prince William and Prince Harry had naturally inherited their mother's most personal and valuable pieces, there were other items from Diana's collection that had been returned to the royal vault after her death. His specific focus was on pieces that Diana had worn frequently, but that were technically part of the royal collection, rather than her personal property. He mentioned the emerald and diamond necklace that his mother had famously converted into a brooch, arguing that this transformation had essentially made it a new piece that should be available for distribution to other family members. He also referenced several other items, including a pearl and sapphire choker, some of Diana's less famous but still valuable earrings, and a diamond bracelet that had rarely been seen in public since Diana's death. Tom's reasoning, as he presented it, was that his children represented a new generation of the royal family and deserved some tangible connection to the history and legacy of the monarchy. He argued that Princess Diana had been beloved by the public partly because of her ability to connect with people from all backgrounds, and that his children, who had grown up outside the traditional royal bubble, embodied some of that same accessibility and relatability. He suggested that giving his children some of Diana's jewelry would be a way of honoring her memory, while also acknowledging the modern, blended nature of the current royal family. He pointed out that other European royal families had successfully integrated stepchildren and step-grandchildren into their traditions and inheritance practices, and he believed the British monarchy should evolve in the same direction. The king listened to this presentation with what sources described as growing concern and discomfort. While he had always maintained a good relationship with Tom and appreciated his generally respectful approach to royal matters, this request crossed lines that had never been crossed before. The idea of redistributing Diana's jewelry, particularly to individuals who were not in the line of succession and who had no blood relationship to Diana herself, was unprecedented and potentially explosive. Charles reportedly asked Tom if he had discussed this matter with his mother, Queen Camilla, before bringing it to the palace. Tom admitted that he had mentioned it to her in general terms, and that while she had not explicitly endorsed his plan, she had not discouraged him from pursuing it either. This revelation added another layer of complexity to an already delicate situation, as it suggested that the Queen might have at least tacit knowledge of her son's intentions. The king explained to Tom that the jewelry in question was not simply sitting unused in a vault, but was part of a carefully managed collection that served important ceremonial and diplomatic functions. He pointed out that many of the pieces were regularly loaned to other members of the royal family for official events, and that some had already been designated for specific future recipients, including his daughter-in-law Catherine and potentially his granddaughter Princess Charlotte when she came of age. But Tom had clearly anticipated these objections. He produced additional documents showing that there were indeed pieces in the collection that had not been worn or displayed in years, and he argued that these particular items could be redistributed without affecting the operational needs of the monarchy. He emphasized that he was not asking for the most famous or valuable pieces, but simply for some meaningful tokens that would allow his children to feel more connected to the family they had been welcomed into. The conversation continued for over an hour, with both men maintaining their composure, but clearly holding very different views about what was appropriate and possible. As word of the meeting began to spread through the palace staff, the reaction was immediate and concerned. Senior courtiers who had served the royal family for decades had never encountered a request quite like this one, and they were unsure how to advise the king on such a sensitive matter. By late afternoon, news of Tom's visit had reached Prince William, who was at his Windsor home with his family. The heir to the throne's reaction was swift and decisive. According to sources close to the Prince of Wales, William immediately understood the implications of what was being proposed and was deeply disturbed by what he saw as an inappropriate attempt to claim pieces of his mother's legacy. William's concerns went beyond the simple matter of jewelry ownership. He viewed Tom's request as a fundamental misunderstanding of royal protocol and inheritance traditions. More personally, he saw it as an insensitive approach to items that held profound emotional significance for him, his brother Harry, and his own children, who were Diana's direct descendants and the rightful inheritors of her memory and legacy. The Prince of Wales immediately contacted his father's office to request his own urgent meeting. Palace staff noted that William's tone was unusually sharp, and that he had made it clear he expected to be heard on this matter immediately. The stage was now set for a family confrontation that would test relationships and potentially reshape the internal dynamics of the modern royal family. As evening approached on that October day, the palace buzzed with nervous energy. Staff members exchanged worried glances in the corridors, and senior advisors began making quiet phone calls to prepare for what they sensed would be a difficult period ahead. The events that had begun with a simple request for a meeting had already grown into something much larger and more complicated, with the potential to affect the royal family for years to come. To understand the full magnitude of what Tom Parker Bowles was requesting, it is essential to examine the extraordinary collection of jewelry that Princess Diana had accumulated during her time as a member of the royal family, and the complex web of ownership, sentiment, and protocol that surrounds these precious items even decades after her death. Princess Diana's jewelry collection represented far more than mere accessories or symbols of wealth. Each piece told a story of royal tradition, personal relationships, diplomatic gifts, and moments of both triumph and heartbreak in her life. The collection included items that spanned centuries of royal history, pieces commissioned specifically for her, gifts from world leaders, and personal purchases that reflected her evolving style and confidence as she grew into her role as the Princess of Wales. The most famous piece, of course, was the sapphire and diamond engagement ring that Prince Charles had given her in 1981. The 12-carat oval Ceylon sapphire, surrounded by 14 solitaire diamonds and set in 18-carat white gold, had been selected by Diana herself from a catalog of options provided by the royal jewelers Gerard. At the time of her engagement, the ring was valued at approximately £37,000, but its worth today extends far beyond any monetary calculation. The ring had become an icon, photographed countless times, and recognized around the world as a symbol of what many had hoped would be a fairy tale marriage. When Diana died in 1997, this ring became part of the inheritance that she left to her sons. Initially, Prince Harry had chosen to keep it, while Prince William selected their mother's Cartier watch. However, when William decided to propose to Catherine Middleton in 2010, the brothers agreed that Harry would give up the ring so that William could use it to propose to his future wife. The gesture was seen as a way of ensuring that their mother's memory would be present at this important moment in William's life, and Catherine has worn the ring with pride and appropriate reverence ever since. But the engagement ring was just one part of a much larger collection. Diana had also inherited and been gifted numerous other significant pieces during her marriage to Charles. The Spencer tiara, which she wore on her wedding day, was actually a family heirloom that belonged to her own family rather than the royal collection. This piece, with its distinctive design featuring stylized flowers and geometric patterns, had been in the Spencer family since the 1930s and represented Diana's connection to her own aristocratic heritage. More controversial in the current dispute were the pieces that had been part of the royal collection and were technically on loan to Diana during her marriage. These included the famous emerald and diamond necklace that had originally been created for Queen Mary in the 1920s. The necklace, featuring a striking cabochon emerald surrounded by diamonds and incorporating the three-feather design that symbolizes the Prince of Wales, had been a wedding gift to Diana from Queen Elizabeth II. Diana had worn this particular piece to numerous high-profile events, including a memorable appearance at a gala performance in Vienna in 1986, where she paired it with a stunning Catherine Walker gown. The necklace became one of her signature pieces, photographed extensively, and always drawing admiration for its bold design and the confident way Diana wore it. After Diana's death, this necklace had been returned to the royal vault, where it remained for years. However, in recent years, Queen Camilla had begun wearing the piece, but not in its original form. Palace jewelers had transformed the necklace into a brooch, altering its appearance while preserving its essential elements. This transformation had been controversial among Diana's supporters, who felt that changing the piece was disrespectful to her memory, while others argued that adapting royal jewelry for different wearers was a long-standing tradition. Tom Parker Bowles had specifically mentioned this piece in his presentation to King Charles, arguing that since his mother had already altered it significantly, it had essentially become a new piece that could be considered separate from Diana's original collection. His logic was that the original necklace Diana had worn no longer existed in its original form, and therefore the transformed brooch could be available for redistribution to other family members. The collection also included numerous other pieces that held both monetary and sentimental value. Diana's pearl collection was extensive and impressive, including a multi-strand pearl choker with a striking sapphire and diamond clasp that had been created from a brooch given to her by the Queen Mother. This piece had become one of Diana's favorites, and she had worn it to many important events, including some of her most memorable public appearances. There were also several sets of earrings that Diana had worn frequently, including sapphire and diamond pieces that complemented her engagement ring, emerald and diamond earrings that matched the necklace that Camilla now wore as a brooch, and various pearl earrings that had been gifts from different members of the royal family. Each set represented not just valuable jewelry, but also relationships, occasions, and memories that were deeply personal to Diana and, by extension, to her sons. Beyond the pieces that were part of the royal collection, Diana had also acquired jewelry through her own purchases and through gifts from friends and admirers around the world. These items, which were unquestionably her personal property, had been divided between William and Harry according to her will and their own agreements. However, the distinction between royal collection pieces and personal property was not always clear-cut, and this ambiguity was part of what made Tom's request so complicated. The monetary value of Diana's jewelry collection was estimated to be in the tens of millions of pounds, but this financial assessment barely captured the true worth of these pieces. They represented connections to centuries of royal history, diplomatic relationships with other nations, and personal moments that had been shared with the British public and the world. Many of the pieces had been photographed so extensively that they had become part of the visual legacy of the British monarchy. Tom's argument about his children deserving some connection to this legacy was not entirely without precedent in other royal families. In various European monarchies, stepchildren and adopted children had been included in inheritance traditions, and jewelry had sometimes been redistributed to reflect changing family structures. However, the British royal family had traditionally maintained stricter distinctions between blood relatives and those who joined the family through marriage or other relationships. The emotional weight of these pieces extended beyond their historical significance. For Prince William and Prince Harry, their mother's jewelry represented one of the few tangible connections they had to her memory. In the years since her death, both brothers had spoken about the importance of keeping her memory alive and ensuring that their own children would know and understand their grandmother's legacy. Prince William had been particularly protective of this legacy, and he had made careful decisions about when and how to share pieces from the collection. His decision to give Catherine the engagement ring had been deeply meaningful, and he had also ensured that Catherine wore some of Diana's earrings and other pieces for important occasions, creating visual connections between his mother and his wife that resonated with the public. The idea that some of these pieces might be given to children who had no direct connection to Diana, despite their position as step-grandchildren of the king, struck William as fundamentally wrong. From his perspective, the jewelry represented not just valuable objects, but sacred connections to his mother's memory that should be preserved for her direct descendants. As news of Tom's request spread through the palace, staff members who had worked with Diana during her lifetime found themselves caught between conflicting loyalties and emotions. Many remembered how much pleasure Diana had taken in her jewelry and how thoughtfully she had chosen pieces for different occasions. The idea of redistributing these carefully curated items felt, to many of them, like a violation of her memory and intentions. The complexity of the situation was further complicated by the fact that Tom's children, Lola and Freddie, were genuinely beloved by their step-grandfather King Charles and had been welcomed warmly into the extended royal family. They had attended family gatherings, participated in some ceremonial occasions, and had developed real relationships with their royal relatives. From one perspective, Tom's desire to give them some tangible connection to this history was understandable, even if his approach was questionable. But the precedent that would be set by granting his request was troubling to many within the royal household. If step-grandchildren could claim rights to jewelry from previous generations, where would such claims end? Would other family members begin making similar requests? Would the carefully maintained traditions of royal inheritance be fundamentally altered to accommodate modern family structures? As the palace prepared for what was clearly going to be a difficult conversation between King Charles and Prince William, the jewelry at the center of the dispute remained locked away in the royal vault, as precious and controversial as ever. The pieces that had once adorned one of the most photographed women in the world had become the focal point of a family crisis that would test relationships and potentially reshape the future of royal traditions. Prince William's reaction to news of Tom Parker Bowles's request was immediate and intense. According to palace sources, the Prince of Wales received the information while he was at Adelaide Cottage with his family, reviewing schoolwork with Princess Charlotte when his private secretary called with details of the afternoon's events. Those present described William's expression as shifting from confusion to disbelief, and finally to what one observer called controlled fury, as the full implications of Tom's request became clear. William's first instinct was to protect his mother's memory and legacy. Since Diana's death in 1997, when he was just 15 years old, William had taken on the responsibility of being her primary guardian in the public eye. He had carefully managed how her memory was honored, how her charitable work was continued, and how her personal belongings were preserved and shared. The idea that someone outside her direct family line was now claiming rights to her most personal possessions struck him as both inappropriate and deeply hurtful. The Prince of Wales immediately contacted his father's office, requesting an urgent meeting that same evening. Palace staff noted that William's tone was unusually sharp and direct. He made it clear that he expected to be heard on this matter without delay, and that he considered Tom's request to be a serious breach of family protocol that required immediate attention from the king himself. Catherine, the Princess of Wales, was equally shocked when William shared the details of Tom's meeting with King Charles. As someone who wore Diana's engagement ring every day and had been entrusted with several other pieces from the collection, Catherine understood better than most the sacred nature of these items. She had always approached wearing Diana's jewelry with tremendous respect and awareness of the responsibility it represented. The thought that these pieces might be redistributed to individuals who had no direct connection to Diana was something she found deeply troubling. Catherine's involvement in the situation added another layer of emotional complexity. She had never met her mother-in-law, but she had spent years learning about Diana's life, work, and legacy. Through wearing her jewelry and continuing some of her charitable initiatives, Catherine had developed a profound connection to Diana's memory. She saw herself not just as William's wife, but as a steward of Diana's legacy for future generations. The idea that this stewardship might be challenged or diminished was something she was prepared to fight against. The couple spent the evening discussing the situation and its implications. William was particularly concerned about the precedent that would be set if Tom's request were granted. He worried that other family members or step-relatives might begin making similar claims, potentially leading to the dispersal of items that had been carefully preserved as part of Diana's legacy. He also questioned whether Tom had fully considered the public reaction to such a move, given the continued public affection for Diana and the sensitivity surrounding anything related to her memory. As William prepared for his meeting with King Charles, he began formulating arguments that went beyond simple family sentiment. He researched historical precedents for royal inheritance disputes and consulted with legal experts about the implications of redistributing items from the royal collection. He wanted to ensure that his objections were based not just on emotion, but on solid legal and constitutional grounds. The meeting between father and son took place the following morning in the king's private study at Buckingham Palace. Those familiar with the conversation described it as one of the most intense exchanges the two had ever had. William began by expressing his profound disappointment that such a request had even been entertained, let alone given a formal hearing. He made it clear that he viewed Tom's actions as a fundamental misunderstanding of royal protocol and family boundaries. William's central argument was that Diana's jewelry represented more than valuable objects or family heirlooms. These pieces were tangible connections to his mother's life and work, and they served as important tools for continuing her legacy through the current generation of royals. He pointed out that Catherine's wearing of Diana's engagement ring and other pieces had been universally praised by the public and media as appropriate ways of honoring Diana's memory while moving the monarchy forward. The Prince of Wales also raised concerns about the message that granting Tom's request would send to the public. Diana remained one of the most beloved figures in recent royal history, and any perception that her memory was being commercialized or her possessions distributed inappropriately could damage the monarchy's reputation. William argued that the royal family had a responsibility to preserve Diana's legacy with the same care and respect that they showed to other historical royal figures. King Charles found himself in an extraordinarily difficult position. On one hand, he had genuine affection for Tom Parker Bowles and appreciated the respectful way Tom had generally handled his unique position within the royal family. Charles also understood Tom's desire to give his children some tangible connection to their step-grandfather's family history. The king had watched Lola and Freddie grow up and had developed real relationships with them, making their exclusion from family traditions feel somewhat harsh. However, Charles also recognized the validity of William's concerns and the potential consequences of setting a precedent that could fundamentally alter royal inheritance traditions. As someone who had himself waited decades to inherit his position, Charles understood the importance of maintaining clear lines of succession and inheritance. He also knew that his relationship with Diana, despite their divorce and the circumstances surrounding it, remained a sensitive topic that required careful handling. The conversation between Charles and William continued for over 2 hours, with both men working to find a solution that would respect family relationships while maintaining appropriate boundaries. Charles expressed his appreciation for Tom's approach to the situation and his desire to find some way to acknowledge his children's place in the extended royal family. However, he also acknowledged that William's concerns about precedent and public perception were valid and important. As word of the family dispute began to spread through the palace, staff members found themselves in the uncomfortable position of choosing sides, or at least appearing to favor one perspective over another. Senior courtiers who had served during Diana's lifetime were particularly conflicted, as many of them had genuine affection for both William and Tom, and could understand both perspectives on the situation. Queen Camilla's position in all of this was particularly delicate. As Tom's mother, she naturally wanted to support her son's desires for his children. However, as queen, she also understood the importance of maintaining royal protocols and not undermining the monarchy's traditions. Palace sources suggested that Camilla had been aware of Tom's general thinking about the jewelry situation, but had not expected him to make such a formal and specific request. The queen found herself caught between her maternal instincts and her royal responsibilities. She had worked for years to build positive relationships with William and Harry, and she understood how important Diana's memory was to them. The last thing she wanted was to be seen as supporting actions that could damage those relationships or cause pain to Diana's sons. William's wife Catherine played a crucial role in reinforcing his position during this period. Her perspective as someone who had been entrusted with Diana's most precious pieces carried significant weight in the discussions. Catherine argued that she had been extremely conscious of her responsibility as a caretaker of Diana's jewelry, and that this responsibility should not be taken lightly or shared with individuals who did not have direct connections to Diana's life and legacy. The Princess of Wales also pointed out that Diana's grandchildren, Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis, represented the direct continuation of her bloodline and should be the primary recipients of any items from her collection that were not already designated for specific purposes. Catherine argued that Princess Charlotte, in particular, as Diana's only granddaughter, had a special claim to items that could connect her to her grandmother's memory and legacy. As the family dispute continued, it became clear that this was about more than just jewelry or material possessions. The conflict represented different views about what constituted a family, how royal traditions should evolve to accommodate modern family structures, and who had the right to make decisions about preserving and sharing Diana's legacy. William's position remained firm throughout these discussions. He believed that his mother's memory and possessions were sacred trusts that should be protected and preserved for her direct descendants. He was willing to consider ways of acknowledging Tom's children's place in the extended royal family, but not at the expense of compromising the integrity of Diana's collection or setting precedents that could lead to future disputes. The Prince of Wales also made it clear that he viewed this situation as a test of his authority as the heir to the throne and the primary guardian of his mother's legacy. He was prepared to take a strong stand on this issue, even if it meant creating lasting tensions within the family. For William, protecting Diana's memory was not just a personal matter, but a royal duty that he was determined to fulfill regardless of the consequences. After 3 days of intense family discussions, private consultations with legal experts, and careful consideration of all perspectives, King Charles made his decision. The announcement came not through a public statement or formal declaration, but through a private meeting with Tom Parker Bowles on the morning of October 18th. Palace staff noted that the king appeared tired, but resolute as he prepared for what would be one of the most difficult conversations of his reign. The meeting took place in the same room where Tom had originally presented his request, but the atmosphere was markedly different. Gone was the hopeful energy that Tom had brought to his initial presentation, replaced by a somber acknowledgement that the situation had grown far more complicated than he had anticipated. King Charles began the conversation by expressing his genuine appreciation for Tom as both a stepson and as someone who had always shown respect for the royal family and its traditions. The king explained that he had given Tom's request serious consideration and had consulted with constitutional experts, family members, and senior palace advisors before reaching his conclusion. Charles acknowledged that Tom's desire to provide his children with some tangible connection to the royal family's history was understandable and came from a place of love and inclusion. However, after careful deliberation, he had concluded that redistributing items from Princess Diana's jewelry collection was not appropriate and could not be approved. King Charles outlined several key reasons for his decision. First, he explained that the pieces in question were not simply family heirlooms that could be distributed at will, but were part of a carefully maintained collection that served important ceremonial and historical functions. Many of the items had already been designated for specific future recipients, including his daughter-in-law Catherine and his granddaughter Princess Charlotte, ensuring that Diana's legacy would continue through the direct line of succession. The king also expressed concern about the precedent that granting such a request would establish. He explained that allowing step-grandchildren to claim rights to jewelry from previous generations could open the door to numerous future disputes and fundamentally alter the way royal inheritance had traditionally functioned. Charles emphasized that while modern royal families needed to evolve and adapt, certain core traditions and protocols needed to be preserved to maintain the institution's stability and continuity. Perhaps most significantly, King Charles acknowledged the deep emotional investment that Prince William and his family had in preserving Diana's legacy exactly as it was. The king explained that William's role as the primary guardian of his mother's memory was not just a personal choice, but an important responsibility that helped maintain public trust and confidence in the monarchy's respect for its own history. Tom's reaction to this decision was one of disappointment, but not surprise. According to palace sources, he had sensed during the family discussions that his request was unlikely to be granted, particularly given the strength of William's opposition. However, Tom expressed gratitude for having been heard and for the respectful way his request had been considered. He also acknowledged that he perhaps had not fully appreciated the complexity of royal inheritance protocols when he first made his proposal. The king did offer Tom a form of compromise, though it fell far short of his original request. Charles suggested that there might be ways to acknowledge Tom's children's place in the extended royal family through other means, such as including them in certain ceremonial occasions, or providing them with pieces from other parts of the royal collection that did not carry the same emotional and historical weight as Diana's jewelry. However, Tom politely declined these alternatives, explaining that his specific interest had been in connecting his children to Diana's legacy and that other gestures, while appreciated, would not serve the same purpose. The aftermath of King Charles's decision rippled through the royal household in various ways. Prince William expressed profound relief and gratitude that his father had chosen to preserve Diana's collection intact. William saw the king's decision as a validation of his role as protector of his mother's legacy, and an affirmation that the monarchy would continue to respect the boundaries between blood family and extended family relationships. Catherine, the Princess of Wales, was equally pleased with the outcome. She had been deeply concerned about the possibility of Diana's jewelry being redistributed, and felt that the king's decision honored both Diana's memory and the responsibility that Catherine felt as the current caretaker of many of Diana's most precious pieces. Catherine privately expressed to friends that she looked forward to eventually sharing some of these items with Princess Charlotte, creating a direct connection between grandmother and granddaughter that would have been complicated by any alternative distribution. Queen Camilla's response to the situation was more complex. While she understood and accepted her husband's decision, she also felt sympathy for her son's disappointment. Camilla had worked hard over the years to build positive relationships within the royal family, and she was concerned that this incident might create lasting tensions or affect her children's future interactions with their royal relatives. However, she also recognized that the king's decision was probably the only one that could maintain family harmony in the long term. The impact on Tom Parker Bowles himself was significant, but handled with characteristic grace. Despite his disappointment, Tom publicly maintained his respectful relationship with the royal family and continued to attend family gatherings and ceremonial events as before. However, those close to him noted that the experience had given him a clearer understanding of the boundaries that existed around his position within the royal family, boundaries that he had perhaps not fully appreciated before making his request. Tom's children, Lola and Freddie, were largely shielded from the details of the dispute, though they were aware that their father had explored the possibility of receiving some family heirlooms, and that this exploration had not been successful. Friends of the family reported that both children continued to enjoy positive relationships with their step-grandfather King Charles, and maintained their affection for the royal family, despite the outcome of their father's request. The incident also prompted broader discussions within royal circles about how to handle inheritance and family inclusion in an era of increasingly complex family structures. Palace advisors began developing clearer protocols for future situations involving stepchildren, adopted children, and other non-traditional family relationships, hoping to avoid similar misunderstandings in the future. Security arrangements around Diana's jewelry collection were quietly enhanced following the incident. While Tom's request had been entirely legitimate and respectfully presented, Palace security experts recognized that the high-profile nature of Diana's jewelry made it a potential target for future claims or disputes. Additional documentation was prepared to clearly establish the provenance and intended recipients of each piece in the collection. The public remained largely unaware of the family dispute, as all parties agreed that keeping the matter private was in everyone's best interest. However, some royal watchers noted subtle changes in family dynamics at subsequent public events. Tom Parker Bowles continued to attend major royal occasions, but observers noted that he seemed to maintain a slightly more formal distance than he had previously. Prince William's relationship with his stepmother, Queen Camilla, remained cordial but perhaps more carefully defined following the incident. While there was no open hostility or dramatic confrontation, William seemed to have gained a clearer sense of where boundaries needed to be maintained within the blended family structure. This clarity, while sometimes creating more formal interactions, may have actually strengthened relationships by eliminating ambiguity about expectations and roles. The incident also reinforced Prince William's position as the undisputed guardian of his mother's legacy. Royal watchers noted that William seemed more confident and decisive in his role following the successful resolution of the jewelry dispute. His willingness to take a strong stand on an issue that was important to him demonstrated leadership qualities that would serve him well in his future role as king. Looking toward the future, the jewelry dispute established important precedents for how the royal family would handle similar situations. The clear message was that while the monarchy was willing to evolve and adapt to modern family structures, certain core traditions and inheritance practices would be preserved. This balance between innovation and tradition would likely guide royal family decisions for generations to come. Perhaps most importantly, the incident reaffirmed the special place that Princess Diana continues to hold in the royal family and in the public imagination. More than 25 years after her death, Diana's memory remains so powerful and her legacy so carefully guarded that even well-intentioned requests from within the extended royal family are subject to intense scrutiny and careful consideration. The resolution of Tom Parker Bowles's request ultimately served to strengthen, rather than weaken, the royal family's commitment to preserving Diana's legacy for her direct descendants, while maintaining respectful relationships with all family members. In protecting Diana's jewelry collection from redistribution, the royal family demonstrated that some legacies are too precious and too significant to be altered, even in the name of family inclusion and modern adaptation.